Good morning. Welcome to The Human Author. My name is Jen Cantwell, and today I'm going to be reading 2 chapters from my book, The Warning. If you're interested in learning a series, which is called Light Chaser, you can visit my author website at jbcantwell.com. So this is the work that I did 2 chapters over the course of the week. So we're starting with chapter 15 and ending with 16. And here we go. Kenneth continued to carry him for another solid hour as we looked for somewhere to hide. He didn't complain, and I found myself walking beside him. "How are you doing?" I asked. At first, he didn't answer. I didn't think he would, based on the look on his face, but then he spoke. "I'm doing fine," he said, irritated. He looked down at the man, but I thought I saw something a little different in his face as he did. "He seems to be doing better. I haven't seen anywhere to hide. Have you?" I hadn't, and I was just about to tell him so when we heard Brennan's voice behind us. "Right there," he said. "I've seen a couple of them as we walked, and I didn't understand what they were before. Do you see where the grass gets thick?" He pointed. We looked after him. The spot in the hill he was pointing to. He quickly ran up to it, sticking his hands through a curtain of grass. Beneath it, a small cave. "How did you figure that out?" I asked. He shrugged. "I wasn't sure at first, but then I realized that I recognized it. Regan and I used to hide in places like that, but I must have been really young because I don't remember it well. Now it seems our problem is solved." He walked up to Kenneth, looking down at the man still asleep in his arms. For the first time that day, it appeared he was no longer frightened. Maybe it was seeing how weak the man was, or maybe it was seeing how his grayed skin had turned back to ivory white. Kenneth and I looked at each other, but we didn't exchange words, simply followed Brennan inside the little cave. It would have been too small for horses, but it was just big enough for the 4 of us. Without being asked, Kenneth laid the man gently upon the ground. Then, when he stood up straight, he hit his head on the roof of the cave, swearing loudly. He glared at me, but I thought he understood. Understood. To his mind, it was my fault, obviously. Of course, he might have hit his head on the ceiling of any cave we might have found, regardless of the man, but I didn't say that. Kenneth left the cave, standing outside as the afternoon sun came in. I didn't follow him. Instead, I sat down next to the man. He was stirring now, and he opened his eyes and stared at me in disbelief. "It is you," he said quietly. "I thought that maybe you were a dream." "What happened?" "Tell me your name." "I'm Bree." Then, without further question, "I am Ronan. How did I get here?" I nodded toward the entry to the cave. Ronan looked confused. Then he saw the shadow of Kenneth walking back and forth just outside. "He carried me, didn't he?" "Yes, and he wasn't happy about it." Ronan sat up and his face relaxed, no longer wincing. "He thinks you should kill me, doesn't he?" "I'm not sure he's wrong," I said. Slowly he nodded. "Maybe that's the way to go. If you kill me now, the danger will vanish with me. But please do not allow him to capture me again. If it comes down to us against him, well, I would gladly embrace death over 1,000 more lives spent with him. Your boy's anger is not misplaced." "Maybe not, but I've seen you. I've seen your mind, and I believe you can come back from this. Honestly, everyone we can get to stand against Torin will be a boon to our side." Suddenly, Ronan's eyes were wide. "That's it. That's his name. I remember him. He taught me to fly. But if I'd known what he really had in mind, I would have taken death then, too." "What can you tell us about him?" I asked, Brennan coming over to me and sitting down on the cave floor. "And how did you fall?" "I do not know the answer to that, but I can tell you that you are in grave danger. He wants you, Bree. He's been searching for you for the last several months. He's running out of time." "What do you mean, time?" Brennan asked. "Yes," I said. "Why is he sent on killing me, of all people? I have some power, but surely it's nothing compared to his." "Whether or not that's true, it is not what he believes. I believe he is frightened, as he has used his wicks frequently in recent months. He's been searching, but he seems to be too scared to do it on his own. I frowned. Scared? How did I even come to be on the list? All I know is that there is a list, Ronan said. I know nothing else. Our instructions were simple, only to find you and bring you to him. But now that I'm here, I do not know how the others will manage it. They will track you, Kenneth said from the entry, making me jump. He's right, Bree. We should kill him now. He turned back to Ronan. It's what you want, isn't it? Ronan looked down at his hands, wringing them in his lap. That's not entirely the case. I want to survive, don't I? Just like any man would. But I'm not a fool. I see the danger you are all in. If our positions were switched, I would kill the wick. Kenneth walked over to Brennan and took the club. Then he approached Ronan, but he wasn't quick enough. I stood up, ready to fight him if need be. He looked at me, seemingly surprised. You heard him, he said. He said he would kill the wick if given the opportunity. He also said he would like to live, Brennan said from across the cave. Shouldn't we let him? I looked over at him, surprised. I also wanted him to stay. Kenneth sighed impatiently. I don't know why you both want to take this man, this monster, and let him live. Torin is likely following us, tracking him. He held the bat ready, smacking it against his palm, waiting for the opportunity. I stepped in front of Ronan, blocking his path. I know you like to be in charge, I said, and that's fine, but this man is coming with me, one way or another. If you need to leave me behind, I'll understand. But he's the strongest thing I've ever seen to break Torin's mind. Torin's sons have come after me, and I've killed them both, but this man is quiet. I believe he can offer us answers. Ronan shrugged. Honestly, there isn't really very much I remember. But you started to, I said. You know your name now. You didn't a couple of hours ago. I think keeping you with us is important. Not to mention, he doesn't have a choice. You'll need to choose, though, I said. But he doesn't have a choice. It's us or death, I'm afraid. You like to do. If you can promise me not to let him take me again, I believe I can help you. I've known him for a very long time, centuries, and while he is careful to protect his thoughts, over the years I have heard things slip. He is not so perfect a sorcerer as some may believe. There is a reason he has not been hunting you himself. I walked back and sat down across from him. And what is that reason? I don't know much, but I believe he is trying to have you delivered to him. There is someone that fears meeting you in battle. I am certain he would much prefer to keep your meeting to a private audience. But why? I asked. Is he really that weak? Ronan shook his head. Oh no, he is quite strong, but he is ancient too. I do not know the extent of his abilities, but I would believe that all of his efforts are focused on your capture. Before I fell, in recent years, I was able to see his intentions. There are hundreds of us, all of us possessed by him, all of them possessed. And what does that make me? I suddenly realized that perhaps my greatest talent of possession would be the key to Torin's undoing. How many others in the world could do it as I could? And if he really was possessing hundreds of wicks, perhaps it would require an army on my side as well. I knew I couldn't do this, though. I tried to think of how we might be visualizing the end of our conflict. Maybe this was nothing more than a game to him. Maybe he wished nothing more than death for his enemies. I remembered those moments in the woods, the words he used to try to sway me to his side. Surely it was all false, but maybe if I played the game myself, there would be a way forward, a way to win. Hundreds of you? But where did you come from? Ronan shook his head, his face sad. That I do not know. I suppose there are two options, two possible answers to that question. Perhaps he found a kingdom and took over everyone within it, or perhaps he's collected us over the years. It is a mystery to me as well. Maybe you'll remember as time goes by, I said. I looked up at Kenneth, who was standing over me, scowling. He might be able to help, I said, standing up. He can tell us things about Torin's inner workings that no one else would be able to. If Torin is able to access the minds of the Wicks, what's to say Ronan can't do the reverse? Maybe if I saved this one man, it would help many others. Would it erase Colm's death from my record? Would it even out and result in repairing my innocence? Finally, at long last, Kenneth nodded his head. What I didn't know was how long I might be able to expect his support. Whatever he decided, I'd finally come to the conclusion, the necessity, that I not kill again. There would be battle, that much was certain, but maybe I would be able to get through it by simply protecting myself. Would that mean cowardice for me? Would I stand by and watch my friends and followers be decimated by this one man and his mad plans? Certainly looking for ways to hurt me, to capture me. No, there would need to be one more death. I would not kill again unless it was the great master at the other end of my staff. We stayed in the cave for quite a while, waiting for Ronan to wake up. It was obvious that he was exhausted despite the healing, but Kenneth was unwilling to give him any more of the light, and I had to admit that I didn't want to give any more of it to him either. But I needed Ronan to survive. Maybe this existence with our resulting in us being tracked by Torin, but I needed the information buried deep within his mind. If we were being tracked, there would be no need to hide any longer. Late that night, I joined Kenneth at the entrance to the cave. He was staring out at the grassy fields below, and it was obvious he had no desire to speak with me. I wondered what had become of the young man I'd come to call my friend. He'd even said he'd had feelings for me. Romance aside, what were those feelings now? I think he's going to while, I said, sitting down beside him. Hopefully he won't need to be carried in the morning. If we're even still here in the morning, Kenneth said quietly. He didn't look away from the fields, just kept his gaze active, searching for any threat. I can see how nervous you are, I began. But I'm not nervous, he snapped. I'm angry. I sighed, knowing that I was going to be unable to do anything about that. I'm sorry. I understand you don't want to bring Ronan with us. If I were you, I might think the same, but I've seen him in ways that no one else can. He's not a bad man. Kenneth scoffed. That won't matter when Torin shows up in front of us as we try to make it back home. I've been thinking about that, I said. Maybe it would be better for you and Brennan to go straight home now. I can keep an eye on Ronan, and I can deal with the consequences. I appreciate your protection, but I don't want to put you in any danger. Finally, he looked over at me. We're all ready. We have been since the day they began arresting sorcerers from the kingdom. Zahn has it out for us, though I can't imagine why. Well, there's a simple answer for that. He's growing his own army, forcing those with magic to become part of it. Whether or not he's working for Torin, we're not going to know the answer to that until we get closer. I think if we see the Wicks surrounding the kingdom, that might be a good sign that Zahn is not acting alone. He searched my face for a few moments, then turned again at the land. The moon was rising, and the light from it was bathing the grass below. I'm starting to believe we'll never make it home, he said, and I'm starting to wonder if it's even worth it at all. Maybe we should just set out for some other new place. You and I could go together. Maybe we should, don't you think? What about Brennan? I asked. We can't leave him behind. And those people back in the forest, they follow you, right? He shrugged. I guess that's true, but I can't really help that or them. I don't have magic like you. All I could do was help them escape. And where did that get them? Starving in a cold forest far away from their homes. Trust me, you don't want to go off on your own. Other places are touched with this evil too. I wanted to do the same thing, and I made my escape from my friends who promised to follow me into battle. I went to Zamira, hoping I would find a place accepting of my magic. Instead, I found yet another kingdom ruled over by an evil sorcerer. He frowned. And who was that? Her name is Erin, I said, or at least it was. I don't know that she'll ever escape her own trap. I tried fighting her, but she was better trained than I was. What's your point? I guess it's the places we dream of, the places we want to escape to, might not be what we expect. My friend Oriana and I dreamt of Zamira for years. Together we planned our escape from Eagleview, but when I finally went to Zamira, I was alone, and I found nothing but danger there. I was lucky to escape with my life. And your friend? I didn't answer, just looked down at my hands in my lap, trying not to cry. Sorry, he said. I forgot about her. She was that girl in the row houses outside the city, wasn't she? But I was done talking. Instead, I stood up and walked back to the others, finding Ronan flat on his back, snoring loudly. I wondered when the last time was he'd had a chance to sleep. Perhaps never. Never in 1,000 years. I thought back to the giants. Most of them had years old. They didn't understand why, but I thought it might have something to do with the large store of light they held under their mountain. I didn't know for sure. I sat down beside Ronan, but when I looked over at Brennan, I found his eyes wide. Are we going to leave him? He asked. He's sure pretty sick for us to do that. I know. I think we're just going to need to take things one step at a time. Did you sleep? A little bit, he said, sitting up. Do you want to turn? No, you should go back to sleep while you have the chance. But he didn't lay back on the floor. Instead, he crossed his legs and stared at Ronan. What do you think? What do I think of what? Do you really think he can help us? I really don't know, honestly. It's dangerous for us to keep him with us, though. I don't know about that, he said. He seems powerless compared to you. It's not him I'm worried about. It's his master. His master's Torin? I nodded. We need to be careful. I've been able to look inside his mind, and in there I can tell you that the real Ronan is struggling to get out from under Torin's thumb. But that doesn't mean that Torin isn't watching too. You're taking a risk staying with me. Do you understand that? It's risky everywhere. I wished that this wasn't true, but I couldn't deny that he was hitting the nail on the head. You and I, let's make each other a promise. Let's look out for each other no matter what. I'll get you to Eagleview. Kenneth, too. But we need to stick together. I don't know about Ronan, but there's more to come from him, I'm sure. Yeah, I feel right. Then, where did you go for all those months? Your father told us you were going into battle. Did you win? I thought back to each massacre I'd witnessed in the months leading up till now. No. And despite the fact that I had begun to amass an army of my own, the truth was that I was a coward, and in war there was no place for cowardice. You lay back and get more sleep, I said. I'll keep watch. He looked over at Ronan. Do you think he's dangerous? I shrugged. I really don't know, but until I do, we should all be careful. Finally, Brennan laid back down, resting his head against the traveling pack. I like him. I get the feeling from him that he's good. I glanced at Ronan's sleeping body, and I found I didn't know what to say. I didn't know yet what this man would truly have to offer us, but what I had learned in the past 6 months was that everyone was struggling with the back of being human. There was no black or white, only shades of gray. I didn't think that Ronan was good or bad, and I realized that I was seeing him now as more of a tool than anything. But tools aren't solutions. They simply help one achieve a goal. Right now, my goals were to protect my friends and stay alive. I wasn't about to abandon these two. You might be right, I said to Brennan, but I guess we won't know until we know. Chapter 16. At some point in the night, I must have dozed off, because when I awakened again, morning sun was streaming in through the blades of grass that covered the opening to the cave. I looked over and saw Brennan still asleep. I poked at him. "Hey, Brennan, time to get up." His eyes stayed closed for a moment, but then he rolled over and stretched his arms over his head, groaning. I laughed. "Sleep well?" He didn't answer me, just sat up and looked around the cave. "Where?" he asked. I looked around, but aside from the two of us, the cave was empty. "He must be outside. It's a little chilly in here." I crouched down, then crawled out of the entrance and looked around. It was my turn to stretch, and it occurred to me that I hadn't had such a good night's sleep in what felt like a very long time. I squinted my eyes in the bright sunlight, then looked around. But there was nobody there. I turned, looking up the hill. It was empty. "What?" "Hello," I called. "Kenneth? Ronan?" Nobody answered. A moment later, Brennan stood by my side. "Where did they go?" he asked. But I didn't have an answer for him. All I had was a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. "I don't know." I walked away from the cave, searching behind the trees, but the copse we were hidden in was empty. "Ronan! Kenneth!" I called. Prickles of panic swept over my body, and for a moment I thought I was going to be sick. He's taken them. He's going to kill him. Of course, these thoughts could have gone in either direction. We didn't really know that much about Ronan. It was entirely possible that he was the aggressor, not Kenneth. One thing was certain, though. Two of our traveling companions had disappeared. "Come on," I said to Brennan, walking away. "Let's get our stuff and get out of here. We need to find them." "What? Why? What do you think has—" "I don't know," I said. "We need to find out. Get moving." I only had to tell him once. He passed me by as he ran to the cave, ducking inside. A few moments later, he was pushing both of our traveling packs out from the cave floor. "Great," I said. "Thanks, Brennan. You ready?" I pulled my pack over my shoulders. "Yeah," he said, a little winded. "Okay, we walk to the highest place we can find. The higher up we are, the more we'll be able to see. We don't know which direction they went in. They could be anywhere." "I don't feel good about this." He wasn't trying to get me to stop. He was clearly ready to go, but I thought I understood what he meant. I put one hand on his shoulder. "We're best off together, okay? I don't want us splitting up. Got it?" He seemed to think about this for a while, then looked up at me. The frown on his face was no longer scared. It was determined. He nodded. "Got it." We began the hike filled with energy and purpose, but as the minutes ticked by, I should feel more and more desperate. We were going up in elevation, but our view had been blocked by trees the whole time. "I think that one there," I said, pointing to a hill up ahead. Brennan looked up, covering his eyes from the bright sunlight. "I guess so," he said, looking around. "It seems the tallest." "Good." It didn't take us long to reach the base of the hill, but once we were standing there looking up, it seemed much more steep than it had looked from afar. I let out a big breath and started to climb. There was no space for words. Despite the fact that we were generally fit travelers, our food situation of late had been sorely lacking. We only had a couple of vials of light left. Suddenly, my mouth filled with saliva at the thought of the taste. "You can't. Don't do it." But it seemed like the best idea in the world, and I required no permission. I stopped the hike and pulled my bag around, reaching for the pocket where the vials were stored. I slid two of them out, then passed them to Brennan. He looked down at it, then up at me. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Yes." If there ever was a time when we needed to use light to help our quest, it's now. It was the truth. I shook the vial in front of him, and he finally took it. We both took out the cork stoppers and drank. Immediately, I felt my body relax. The light coursed through me, filling up all the little crevices, feeding me and healing every ache. And then there it was, energy. Brennan raised his eyebrows and nodded his head. He handed me the empty vial. Seeing a single drop left within it, I tipped it back. I didn't realize how desperate this looked until I saw Brennan's face. His frown had returned, but this time it was concerned. Did you just lick that vial? I looked around guiltily. Then I shrugged. Yep, it's too valuable to waste. This was half lie, but I didn't care. I slid my pack onto my back again and continued the climb. Suddenly, climbing was easy. Climbing was only as hard to do as walking. I didn't look back, didn't wait for Brennan. I simply continued onward. I wasn't surprised when he passed right by me. It only made me climb faster. Finally, after just 10 minutes, we made it to the top of the hill, only slightly out of breath. Be careful, I said, pointing to a steep cliff off to one side. I looked around at the valley below and immediately saw them. I didn't know what to expect, but what I saw was definitely unexpected. Kenneth was carrying Ronan, and they were headed in our direction. I thought about this for a moment, tried to piece it together in my mind. What had happened? I raised my arms above my head. Kenneth, I called, waving my arms in the air. Kenneth, up here. With the second call, he looked up. Then he turned our way and started running. I glanced at Brennan, but he was faster than I was, already on his way down the hill. I ran down after him, suddenly dying to get to them. Something was terribly wrong. The power of the light kept my footfalls even, compensated for rocks in the dirt looking to trip me up. It had taken us 10 minutes to climb the hill, but only a couple to get back down again. Now I could see Kenneth up ahead of us. He stopped running and fell down in the grass as we approached. Kenneth, I called out, suddenly running flat out. Just get there. It was only minutes, but when we finally reached them, they both lay unconscious on the ground. How many vials left? Brennan fell to his knees, first focusing his attention on Kenneth. He put his hands on his shoulders and shook him. Kenneth, get up! Beneath Kenneth lay the frail body of Ronan. I bent over and pulled Kenneth away from him, hoping the poor man hadn't been crushed by his weight. Then, when they both lay on their backs, I reached around for the bag. 3 left. 2 for them. 1 for... I didn't finish that thought. Instead, I pulled out the 2 vials and handed one to Brennan. I knelt down before Kenneth and opened his mouth with my fingers. Kenneth, I said loudly, open your mouth. But he was out cold. Slowly, carefully, I poured a couple of drops out of the vial. Then, when he began to choke, he woke up. Don't spit it out, I warned. I could tell he was hearing me, even trying to keep the liquid in. But he coughed and coughed. Finally, when his throat was clear, he took my hands. Bree, I went after him. He left in the middle of the night, and I thought he was going to meet with Torin. But before he could get anywhere, he must have fallen. He reached out for the vial, then gulped it down. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's better. You saved him? I asked, surprised and impressed. He nodded. Next to him, Ronan was coughing a little bit too. Then, when he sat up, Brennan put the vial up to his mouth and poured the rest in. But it wasn't working. This time, the light wasn't helping him. Why? He remained on the ground. The 3 of us around him. I put my ear to his chest, but the heartbeat I felt there was quite soft. Suddenly, I worried that he would die, and that it would be my fault. I put my hands over his chest, and just as I was about to try to heal him myself, I heard a sound that froze the blood in my veins. The screaming of Wicks. Had Kenneth been right all along? Was Torin using Ronan to track us? I couldn't be sure sure, and I didn't care anyway, like that we had done right by him. But now we were about to be under attack. High up above us, no fewer than 20 wicks flew around in a circle like a giant tornado. We need to get out of here, I yelled over the din. We need to hide. But the only place I could think of was back in that cave we'd left behind. It had been the only place we'd been that had completely camouflaged us. It was too far away. We would never make it in time. The closest choice we had was to climb a hill to where a group of oak trees clustered halfway up. I could hide the others there and then fight the wicks from the summit. I didn't ask. I just stood up and turned to run. Can you carry him now? I called. Yes. A moment later, the three of us were running back up the hill, Ronan's near lifeless body draped over Kenneth's shoulder. The trees were only halfway up, but it was harder the second time around. It took us twice as long, even though we were climbing as fast as we could. Finally, reached the relative safety of the trees. Kenneth leaned over and eased Ronan's body into the grass. Then he sat back on his heels and took several deep breaths. It's not lasting as long anymore. The light. I could feel it myself. I thought it was only me, that maybe the light seemed weak because I was needing it more and more. But for the first time, I was recognizing that no, maybe it was the light itself. Was it possible for light to lose some of its power? There was no more time for questions, though. The wicks were upon us, hovering right above the trees. I took off my pack, throwing it down to the ground. I'm going up there, I said. Stay here and keep. I'm going with you, Kenneth said, standing up. I can help. You can't leave me here, Brennan said. I can't just be. Stop, I yelled, for suddenly the air around us had gone quiet. All of us slowly raised our eyes toward the sky. The wicks were still up there, but they hung from the sky as still and as puppets on strings. You can't save me, Ronan croaked from the ground. Use me. Use me. He reached out for me, and I looked at the others. What do I do? Kenneth, take your club and get ready to start swinging. Brennan, you stay here with us too. Then, with little other choice, I knelt down before Ronan and closed my eyes. Slowly, his grip upon my hands relaxed as I dove into his mind, and I heard it so loud that I put my hands over my ears, certain my eardrums would burst. Ah, I have found you, Torrin's booming voice said. I looked up to the others, but they were distracted by the wicks. They couldn't hear what I could. It was only in my head and in Ronan's. You have proved to be a slippery little tramp for me to pin down. But now I'm getting closer. Have you noticed? I've noticed. I've also noticed we have yet to meet. All in good time, my dear. Though I must admit, perhaps today might be a good time. I mean, all those wicks there in attendance, witnesses to your death. It could be grand. Fine then, come on out. I'm waiting. Laughter. You must be really afraid to stay in the shadows. The laughter stopped. I stay where I am because I have a reason to be there. You're just something off to the side, a distraction. You're lying. Silence. Then, instead of speaking any further, he did something else. He struck down a wick from the sky above. The others gasped as they saw him fall, and try as I may to stay focused, my chest seemed to implode at the sight of him. In the distance, we heard the crashing sound of his body hitting the ground. Then another. Then another. Stop! I had his attention again, and he paused. Come with them, Torrin said to me, and I will stop. I stared around helplessly, heart pounding. Part of me couldn't believe what I was seeing. Torrin was killing the members of his own army, one by one, just to toy with me. How many did he have? 50 wicks? 100? We need to get higher up, I said to the others. I can't save them from down here. Save them? Kenneth asked. What are you talking about? Can't you see? He's killing them off. We have to get higher. Huffed, but I didn't have an answer for him that he would have liked. I just don't see the point in. I know, I said, but you will. Come on, I can protect you, but I can't get to the wicks unless I have a clear shot. I stood up and began the climb anew. Bree, he said, exasperated, but I didn't stop. Come on. The whole time during the climb, I could hear more wicks hitting the ground. Torin's attack upon them had started afresh. I didn't look back. I wasn't sure if they were going, but suddenly I realized I didn't care. There was an entire army hitting the ground around us. I had to do something. I was running up the hill now, not bothering to look back, not bothering to produce a shield to protect myself. All I cared about was getting to the wicks before any more of them fell to their deaths. Maybe they're not dead. Ronan hadn't been dead, and he'd fallen. Maybe it was a trick. A part of me, the human part, knew that I had to try to save. Ronan had taught me enough to understand that Torin's army was still conscious inside, that a part of them could see and understand Torin's plans for them. Whatever it had been that he'd promised them, he'd lied. That shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. It was so easy to imagine the wicks as being nothing more than robes and evil, easy to imagine that they weren't men at all. Ronan had changed all of that, though. Finally, I reached the top of the hill, and from up high, everything. My friends were only a minute away, all of them having blindly followed me. I guess I'm in charge after all. But that didn't matter. All it meant was that I was able to do as I pleased, that I could plan out my battles and expect others to rally around me. Soon they were at the top of the hill with me, and everything began again. Crash! Another wick, another soldier? Could it be that the wicks might fight on our side? I put up a barrier between our party, ensuring the safety of us all. But it was becoming clearer and clearer that we were not the ones who were in danger. He wanted me and only me, and until he got what he wanted, he would kill the wicks one by one. I know this isn't what you want, he said. You can make it all stop right now. Suddenly, 4 wicks broke apart from the others and flew in our direction. Go with my chosen few. Come to me at last. I will not. Come for me yourself if you are so brave and powerful. What is it to say that you're anything more than a man? What is it to say that you're anything more than a child? A child? Immediately, the 4 wicks who were flying above jerked, their necks breaking. I will not give myself up to your army. I will not give myself up, I yelled out loud. And then, all at once, the 4 wicks fell. It was like watching rain, watching a body in the scant moment of death. For I understood now. He would kill them all just to get to me. Suddenly, I felt pushed out of Ronan's mind, my connection with Torin broken. The next thing I saw, Ronan was on his feet. Kenneth was trying to hold him back, but it appeared he'd finally taken in the strength the light had to offer. In moments, he was next to me. I must go, he said. You have been kind, but this must end. I must save my brothers. I reached out for his, but he pulled it away from me, turned, and ran. It was only in those last final moments that I realized his intention, and I was too late. He ran to the edge of the precipice and did not even slow down, throwing himself off the cliff, powers gone. Torin screamed, and this time everyone could hear him. I ran to the edge of the cliff, getting down on my hands and knees so I could see below. But as I searched for my new friend, I found that he had disappeared, and as I took Kenneth and Brennan, the rest of the wicks fell to the ground, dead. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about The Human Author, you can email me, jen@thehumanauthor.com. I will be back here again next Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Thanks again, and have a great weekend. Bye.